Welcome.
Hello and welcome to the Cybersecurity Leadership Series organized by Cyber Houston. We are live and excited to have you join us today. In this series, we highlight our cybersecurity rockstars or masterminds and bring you valuable information, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. I am Umesh Verma, CEO of Blue Lance and the founder of Cyber Houston. We thank our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for underwriting the Cybersecurity Leadership Series. Now, for our viewers, we love getting questions from our audience. So if you have a question or comment that pops up anytime during the session, please enter it in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube under the live video, and we will try and answer as many as we can. Also, we are just like everyone else. We love being loved. So show us some love by hitting the like button and cheering us on. And remember to subscribe and hit the notification button. That way YouTube and Facebook will automatically notify you whenever we are scheduled to go live. Now, today's topic is to learn the secret to protecting against ransomware. In this broadcast, we will cover not only how ransomware works, but also provide a step-by-step action plan for what you can do to protect your organization against ransomware. I am so happy to introduce our guest today, who is the Director of Information Security at Meriplex. He's a member of the Greater Houston Cybersecurity Council and a program co-chair of the Houston Cyber Summit. Andres Ruz, Andy, is an executive with over 20 years of global experience in IT and information security. He started his career as a help desk technician while in college. He is the founder of the Houston Banking Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, ISAO, where he collaborates with leaders in infosecurity to better protect their banks. He is also the sector chief for the Telecommunications Cross-Sector Council of InfraGard. On a personal note, he is married and father of one little daughter. He loves reading, sports, and teaches spiritual formation for adults at a Catholic church in Kosher. Welcome, Andy, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mesh. I'm very happy to be here with you guys again.
Well, and you know, Andy, you were on the show last month, and we had a very lively and informative session on phishing. And today we'll be exploring ransomware. But first, tell me, what have you been up to lately, and how are you and your family adapting to COVID? And how's that lovely little girl of yours? And have you and she watched every Frozen video?
I think that we need to share with the audience that my daughter crashed in one of our meetings, and she appeared in the screen and say hello to everyone, and that's how you got to meet her. And she has done already a couple of times that to me. So now the door is closed and she's at the school, so there's no risk of that happening. Things are going well, actually.
Actually, I thought that was very, very nice. I would have probably enjoyed talking to her more.
Yeah, she doesn't like when I talk about cybersecurity. She doesn't enjoy that much. You know, it's like, where is Olaf? Where is, Princess Anna? So things have been very well. You know, I think there is I was talking to my wife the other day and say, very soon it's going to come to that time that I work more at home than in the office this year, which never happened in my whole life, right?
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, that's kind of unique. The second thing is, I'm very lucky in working for Meriplex, because our management team has been super engaged with the situation and allow us to work from home, allow us flexibility under the current circumstances. So that has been a bless, to be honest with you, Umesh. And we have been able to accommodate to the situation. And of course, this is also helping us to help customers. As you can imagine, I was explaining this in a forum of people the other day, is that we receive calls from customers when this happened that they want to go to one extreme of the spectrum, and the same day another customer to another extreme, right? So they will say, oh, we have to enable multi-factor for all VPN access, right? That was, and the other spectrum is, no, we need to open port 3389 for everyone to have access and not having issues. So it's very interesting to see how the risk profile of these customers is impacting decision making about cybersecurity during this pandemic.
Well, that's very interesting because you're talking about people now accessing their infrastructure remotely. They have VPNs, and yet there's a huge vector of risk at the remote workstation because some of them may be using corporate laptops and desktops, some may not be, and then they're sharing a router and Wi-Fi with their family and their friends and their kids and their kids' friends, and so and remote desktop top attacks are rising. But we'll leave all of that for another series. But today,
Yes.
I think with the level of sophistication and of cyber criminals increasing rapidly, and the number of attacks rising, and the ransom amounts increasing. Really looking forward to your presentation today, Andy. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let's start the presentation.
Thank you. So let's get started with the presentation today. Okay, so learn the secret to protect against ransomware. As any kind of attack, you will realize that there is a lot of misconception about ransomware itself. And what we're trying to do today is we're going to explain what it is. We're going to pretty much explain how does it work, and then what can you do to prevent ransomware. There's a lot of things that you actually can do. And of course, as always, we're going to close with some takeaways. And I like to say from the takeaways, if you don't remember nothing from what I said, those are the 4 things that I want you to take home and remember from the presentation today. Now, with that, let's get started. So what is ransomware? What happens is you're working one day in your computer, suddenly malware is installed or deployed, or you click on something, but malware is present in your computer. That can be coming from, a phishing email, from a vulnerability, from, some software that you download. It doesn't matter how that software arrives to your computer, but that software is present in your computer, and that software is going to encrypt all your files. Now, what we have seen is that that's not the only thing that it does. Before sending you any message saying, hey, your files have been encrypted, it's going to also check where you connected. And it's going to check if you have access to your file server. So you have access to, the backups of the organization, and what level of access you have. It's going to try to increase the permissions to see if they can reach those devices and those services. And they're going to try to also encrypt that. This happens super fast. Then what happens is you receive this horrible message in your screen saying your personal files have been encrypted. Please pay this amount of money using normally Bitcoin to pretty much recover those files. So this is a 10,000 level view about what is ransomware. Now, this is a graphic that I like to use, and we're going to go step by step on this one. On the anatomy of ransomware attack. And again, this is something that you will see a lot in the presentation because we're going to use it both to explain what is ransomware, but also to explain the steps that it takes. So in this case, on this particular case, we're using just a phishing email, which is one of the most common ways of how ransomware attacks are successful in organizations. So someone will send a phishing email to your organization. And we talk a lot about phishing, right? So in our previous presentation, we talk about a lot of phishing and how can you protect about phishing. Now, I don't know if you remember, but the clicking rate of an organization that is doing phishing campaigns and is doing awareness training is 3%. That means from 100 people, there's going to be 3 clicks. These guys need 1 click, not 3, 1 click to be successful. So as soon as that person clicks that email, the malware is going to be deployed in that computer. And that can be from a download on the site, or it can be just the person accessing a site and download the software that was presented to them as a different alternative. So at this point, the malware is in that computer. And as you can see from the steps here, that's step number 3. The malware is already deployed. And that malware sometimes is not even the malware that is going to encrypt the files. The only thing that malware sometimes is going to do is communicate to the right side with these command and control servers. That malware, the only thing that sometimes is going to do is talk to those servers, to those domains. And then those command and control servers are going to send the different malware who is going to take care of the encryption. Now, as you can see, all this happens before your files have been encrypted. So there's a lot of things that happen before that happen. The files are encrypted. So you receive that, and then you have the malware that communicates with the CSC, and then you have the encryption malware, pretty much. Then what will happen whenever the analysis is done is going to communicate back and download the public key. And that public key is going to be the one that is used for encryption. And then your files and you have the ugly message saying, that will be your step number 6 in this picture. Now, step number 7 and 8 are related to if you pay using Bitcoin, okay, the private key is going to be delivered for you to unencrypt the files. And by the way, this is something I need to tell you, is not all the time the private key works, and not all the time you will get the private key. So there's no guarantees that whenever you pay the ransom, you will get your files back. So this is one more time. This is something that we're going to revisit time because this is something that I will love you guys to understand very well from the presentation today. So a couple of the trends, again, talking about what's ransomware and some of the trends. As we were talking about, phishing is one of the major ways that these ransomware attacks happen. That's the avenue that a lot of these attackers use to get to your system. And the main reason is because it's very effective. It's very cheap for them to do it in this way, and it's very, very effective. Now, on the tool side, and this is a surprising thing, is whenever they establish that communication to the command and control servers, and they already deploy the first malware, you will find tools that are very easy to use and very available to anyone. Like if you download the penetration testing tool, like Kali Linux, all these tools will already be there for you. So these are not, super complicated tools that the guys are doing. Yes, of course, there is some changes in the way how these ransomware work, but the tools that these guys are more leveraging are things that are very normal, and they're already known that they should be blacklisted in your environment. Now, what we also have seen is that there's different sectors that are going to be pretty much more attacked than others. So on healthcare, for example, right now is top. And one of the things that we have seen about the healthcare is there's two reasons why. The first one is because a lot of these ransomware attacks do data exfiltration before encrypting the files, because they steal your information and then they encrypt it. And as you can imagine, with healthcare, now you are you have to report that to HIPAA because you are in a breach situation and your PHI information has been stolen. So it's a double problem now. It's not only that you don't have the information, any more access to your information from an availability problem in security, but now you also lose your confidentiality because that information has been in the bad guy's hands. So this is, again, a very, very high-level overview of how ransomware works. Now, if we go to the operation and we go a little bit detail on how it works, there's two types.
Andy,
yes, Umesh,
can I interrupt for a minute and just ask
Totally.
you, have you seen an increase in healthcare attacks during the pandemic, especially because there's so many patients going through the system?
Yes, and we were talking with the CISO not long ago about this, and why is the main reason we have seen this? Is because the IT team is extremely busy in trying to provide services for the doctors to be doing what they are doing, right? So this guy was explaining to me that they have to hire like 3,000 new nurses in a week. It's a ridiculous time frame that never happens. So the whole IT team and the IT information security is collaborating to provide resources to these people to do their job. Sadly, if they're doing the SOC inside, on the security operations center, also from the inside, they don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth to pretty much review the same level of events. They were engaging with us because we cannot keep up with that, with all these situations that we have going on. So there has been an increase on this, and also the second portion is because we have now changed the perimeter of where some of these people work. So we see a lot of telehealth happening, uh, from homes to to your doctor office to do some of that. So those would be kind of my main reasons I would tell you for the healthcare industry that we have seen a change.
Thank you.
No problem. So on the selection of the victim, there's two important things. People think that this is never going to happen to me. This is a very normal kind of mindset from a human being. This is something that only happens to big companies. No, there's two type of victim selection. A lot of these guys, they have a robot that they put the scripts and they send this out, right? And they and they say it's on the millions, right? They send a lot. Now you can be one of them, and if you're selective and you, for some reason, one of your users click on this, then they're going to chase that and do the kind of the next steps on you. But then there you have a second type, that is the target attacks. And these are kind of the people that they wanted to go for. Someone that is going through immersion and acquisition is a big target for a ransomware attack, because they know that there's a purchase happening. People is very insecure at the moment. There's a change in emotions in organizations. So these people are going to be target for this type of attacks. The next one will be any kind of big organization, or if you are going through big publicity, or for example, TextDot has been targeted for ransomware attack. Texas, sadly, we have been very unlucky with this between these 2 years. But TextDot suffered a ransomware attack less than a month ago. So those are more targeted to big organizations, big companies, but this doesn't mean that this can happen to you. So there's two different type of selection. Is the robot doing the shotgun approach, and then there's the ATP more, okay, I'm going to try to pick on this organization. I'm going to do spear phishing to certain people and trying to get there. Now, how the payload gets to your computer, as we were talking, the most common way is the phishing attack. And that phishing attack is coming from the shotgun approach or the spear phishing, where I select who should I contact and who I shall kind of pretty much want me to click. Now, that's not the only way. There's another way that we have seen that has been very effective, that is your vulnerabilities, right? I had sometimes meetings with the customers about vulnerabilities, and that's something that everyone should be doing and something about it, right? So you have a lot of new vulnerabilities. I think that last month we have 1,200 new vulnerabilities, and at least 10% are going to impact your organization, and you have to do something about it. So these are the top 5 that have been identified as ransomware kind of open doors for attackers to use. So you have the Citrix vulnerability, we have the pool secure VPN, the SharePoint servers, the Exchange servers, and the Soho managed engine. And of course, another one that I need to mention is, if you have RDP open to the public, that's just a bad practice. You have to close that out. You have to put a different VPN concentrator and make people log into the VPN. I know that for some users that is problematic, let's say, but that's the way that you can defend on that situation. The third thing that happens is, when the payload is on the computer, what it's going to do is 2 things. First of all, it's going to try to run this untrusted code, and it's going to try to escalate the privilege within this computer. Why they do that is because they want to move out. They don't want to only do things on your computer, but they want to get out of your computer and impact as many machines, as many devices, as many storage places they can. And something very important is, they will try to lateral move to your network shares and your backups. Your backups are probably the first target that they will go, because they know that if they get your backups, then you cannot recover your information, right? If you have your backups working, then a lot of people just restore and they do the analysis after the fact about what happened on the situation. But I will tell you, that one of the main things that we have seen is that the backups is mainly one of the main targets for these attackers. Okay, so on the communication, if we remember seeing the anatomy on the right side. Yes, Umesh.
So let's talk about escalation of privileges for a moment.
Yes.
Um, the yes, typically what's happening, they're stealing or they're buying the credentials, or they're stealing the credentials. Now
Yes.
they have access. They brute force because many people don't have password expiration or account lockout privileges turned on,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
that's for convenience perspective. So it's poor hygiene. So they brute force and they get in. Now, when they get in, they drop a payload. And if you're not monitoring your system, and you're buying administrative credentials off of the dark web, particularly for SMBs, I would say is the big target.
Yes. Correct.
And because, like you were mentioning, even at 3,000 nurses for a major firm, that put a lot of load onto the IT side, and it distracted them from the SOC operations.
Yeah.
So now you have going after organizations, and you're brute forcing through a phishing attack or through stolen credentials. You download a payload. And now, in most of these cases, I would say they are using an Active Directory network.
Yes. Yes, and that's where LT auditor can be very effective, right? And this is something that I'm going to mention more in the prevention. Identity and access management is a key component of anything related to security, right? And for
Right.
example, something that LT, like again, Blue Lens LT auditor can protect of identifying the accounts that are dormant, identifying the accounts that have passwords that that are never expiring, and that's something that from a cyber regime you have to do, because these people, what they do is they get to that computer, they deploy the malware there, and then they can get exactly all the credentials from whoever has been in that machine. And if you have administrator people that has been there, they never change the password, then they have, I don't know how much time to move laterally, right? That's where, again, tools like LT Auditor can tell you, hey, you have these problems with these accounts, you have these kind of key things that you have to keep up with your cyber hygiene from identity and access management.
Right. And so you have to constantly, continuously update and monitor for administrative privileges, et cetera, like that. So the cyber hygiene aspect becomes very important in prevention.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Agree.
Yeah.
Now, whenever we talk about the communication piece on this, is we're going to start saying, okay, you have the malware that Umesh was saying is, okay, so how does this malware work? There's something in the ransomware and the command and controls that is beaconing. Beaconing pretty much means beaconing. Okay, Elizabeth has a question. What is the latest on how ransomware works? Okay, I have a story about that. The story is not a fun one. We received this from Homeland Security 2 weeks ago. There was a new type of ransomware that is what it's doing is using your hypervisor in your machine. So if you have like a Oracle or one of the, in this case was used the Oracle free version of the hypervisor, they will deploy a VM in your machine. So your AV, we shall see a new VM. They will turn it on in your hypervisor, and from the hypervisor, they will map your drives from your local computer and then encrypt all your computer. So this is for a traditional antivirus. They will not see this, even if it's a known ransomware, because everything happened within that virtual environment. They will map your drives, they will map all the environment from the Oracle VM, and then they will encrypt all your hard drive. And this is something that is amazing. This, we are dealing with people that is extremely smart. So the way that they presented this is extremely good. So that's one of the latest on ransom. Now let's go back to here. So beaconing is whenever your machine needs to say to the server, hey, I'm here, do you need anything from me? Hey, I'm here, do you need anything from me? So that's a small packet that is sent to the CSC infrastructure with certain frequency. Now, when the CSC wants them to do something, then they tell them, yes, please go ahead and privilege escalation, or go ahead and deploy the ransomware encrypting the files. The next step is the key management, right? That public key, private key communication also happen from the Tor side. And the last piece, of course, is the encryption and the ransom on the communications. So let's talk about prevention, because I think probably everyone is waiting for this part, right? So what can we do to prevent ransomware, right? So I will ask a question to our audience, and let's see who can answer first. What was one of the major, there's a couple, but what one was the most common avenue for a ransomware attack to start? So what is one of the most common? Let me see if someone is answering. We have a very quiet and shy audience today, and maybe Leslie or maybe Liz can tell me that if they see the comments. Let's give it a second. So what is the most common way for a ransomware attack to start? What are your takes? Okay, we have a very, very shy, very good phishing, correct. Okay, very good, phishing is the most common avenue. So remember this, and I think that if you're working in cybersecurity, the only way that you can do prevention is that if you understand the situation, if you understand the problem. So what we're doing here is we're going to just separating the different aspects of how if a ransomware attack will start. And this is the initiation phase. We call it initiation phase. Very good, Danielle, you got it. So we want you to think on these three things whenever we're talking about ransomware, because these are the three things that are going to be proven more effective, again, talking about that initiation phase. First of all is user training. User training is the most effective, or one of the most effective ways of people not clicking links that they should not click, right? As we were talking before, if you have an average click of a 3%, from 100 people, you have one click, and pretty much your ransomware is already there. So you want to work in your user training. You want them to be very good trained about what things they should consider. You should actually fish them and then actually see what are the results. And something I like to say with the phishing campaigns are not to punish people if they click it. That's not the approach. The approach is, if you identify people that is, clicking on things, train them. Make sure that they have the information available to understand why this has happened. The second thing is a good anti-phishing solution. So if there is a lot of software today that you can use for this. There's a lot of solutions, and you have to make sure that you have something that's going to protect from the most common type of attacks. Very good, Michael. One of them is pretty much mark anything that comes from the outside, which has an attachment or which has a link, right? There is a lot of companies that are putting external in the subject line, and they're putting something, highlighted in the body of the email saying, be aware, be conscious of what you click or what you open, something to help the users, remind them about that these things can happen. Then there's the two additional bullet points here: use DMARC and configure properly. These are going to give a lot of configuration aspects to your solution that are going to be clear. So DMARC is a domain-based authentication reporting and conformance that has the ability to help you with the spoofing. And then remember that as every solution in security, whenever you deploy it, you have to work in the configuration aspects. You cannot leave it there and never touch it. Every anti-phishing solution has blacklists, they have whitelists, they have a lot of features you can take advantage, they have sandboxing for malware. So find out which one is right for you and pursue that one. And the last one is one of my favorite subjects in security, which is vulnerability management. We talk a lot about this in our conversations, and something that people don't realize, that these things are available for anyone to use. If there is a vulnerability in the market, there is going to be an exploit very soon. And if there is going to be an exploit, that means that anyone can do it. Anyone can use it, even in script kiddie, which is a person who The only thing that it does is download malware or download tools to use, and then pretty much try to attack an organization. So a couple of things there is patch management. Remember that you have to patch your systems, and then remember that sometimes you have to have an emergency management for vulnerabilities, right? In your change management process, you should evaluate when sometimes you have a 0-day that has been pushed and that you're aware about, and then protect your organization. So this is one of the things I like to say from ransomware. Look at all the things that you can do to prevent the initiation. So there's a lot of things already that you can do to prevent this from starting. But let's say that for whatever reason, right, you were not able to prevent that some of the users click on that email, and now you are in the second phase. That is, the malware is going to be there. Yes, Umesh.
Can we go back to the last slide for a
Yes,
moment,
sir.
please? You know, I get this question a lot. So maybe we could spend a little bit of time on marking external emails using a DMARC and configuring properly. People think that you need special tools to mark emails as coming from external sources, and that's not true, is it?
No, it's not. You're 100% right. So
Right.
that's a good case. So mark external emails, for example. Let's spend a second there. Pretty much everyone that we do business with, they have a G Suite or they have Office 365. In our experience, I would tell you that 98% has or Exchange or Office 365. Right. And that's just a small configuration rule in your Exchange. Zero cost. And this is something that you and I talked multiple times, Mesh. A lot in cybersecurity sometimes is not purchasing new things, but taking advantage of the things that you have. So
Exactly.
and maybe changing the way that you work, changing your process. And this is a great example of that. This is a creation of a rule in your Exchange server, in Office 365, in your G Suite, where you said, every email that comes from the outside, I want to put this in the body or this in the subject. And that is tremendous help for the users. We all heard about the story about, the CEO who asked to purchase, the gift cards for the
Employees.
customer, whatever, right? So, and then we say, okay, but if you see the same CEO name and you didn't get for whatever reason, and you were spoofed in a very tricky way, this will help you, because this is going to mark that email as external. So how your email from a CEO is coming from the external, imagine how much help will be for the person that is needing to do that action, right? So these are small things that sometimes you can do. And the same thing with DMARC. DMARC are just records that you have to add to your DNS registration, right? So there you need to add an SPF record, a CNAME, an A record to comply with those standards. And that's nothing really super overcomplicated to achieve. Of course, you have to make sure that you're on the other end, the email server also supports that, but nothing complicated.
And
the
then
last
you
thing,
apply an SSL certificate on top of
correct.
that.
Well, I hope you already have a certificate, but if not, yes, you should apply one.
Yeah.
And then the last portion is something that I have seen a lot in security. The people who has been doing security for long, they think that this is like the old Cisco PIX firewalls that you deploy once, you do the configuration, and then almost it doesn't change, right? No, security today changes a lot. You have to be on top. You have to be on top of the configuration and the monitoring of what's going on in your network. And that will apply across the board to any security. And the phishing solution being the way that we're phished today, and the impacts that, as you can see, we can talk about, data exfiltration and ransomware, is something that is not an alternative. People need to pay attention to the phishing solution, and they need to make sure that they are receiving updates on different aspects of how that solution is working.
And Andy, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but especially with small and medium-sized businesses, when there is churn or they have their network administrators turnover, many companies leave the same administrator credentials, user ID, and passwords in place, and they just turn it over to the new individual, or they create or clone the user and they leave the old credentials still there. And so one of the things from under configuring properly, I think, is a point you're making, is that when people turn over, especially administrators who have access to credentials, make sure to change the credentials for the admin users too.
Yeah, and normally, again, this is one of those areas that I have been doing IT and security for long now, since Windows 3.1, and I would tell you that there's amazing tools, again, like LTO Editor, which helps you with that, because you can have a process, and of course you should have a privileged access management process that is defined for your organization about how you manage your administrators. But then you need a tool. You need a tool that audit the system, right, to identify where those gaps are, and without the tool, it's very hard for you, especially if you change jobs and you're in a new environment and you don't know what you're getting. You need a tool to help you audit those things, to identify those things. And because we're not every day on every server, a tool will help you to have a better control on identity and access management. And that's where, again, tools like LTO can help a lot. Did that answer kind of your question?
Yeah, I was kind of going on to some of the blocking and tackling that is very, because some people think it's very basic and these things just happen, but they don't happen till you actually have a process and a policy in place, and you follow through with the policy.
Yeah, and something else to say is, like, we're going to talk about a lot of different solutions today, and one of the things that I want to say is all this works together, right? It's like a small onion with all the different layers that you can have. So whenever we break ransomware in these 4 steps that we're going to talk today, what I want people to take from this is there's a lot of things that you can do. Yes, there's going to be always the case of something very weird, very complex that you will not get, but this is going to help you protect a lot of the most common ransomware attacks from initiating, which is the pretty much on the prevention side. Okay, so let's go on the next step. Let's say that someone click on that email, right? Someone download the malware, right? Or is going to download the malware. They didn't see the email. Now, how we prevent that? First of all, that malware to get to your computer, and if it gets to your computer, how we prevent to execute, which is a total two different things, by the way. One thing that can prevent from download, that if you're in the office, you have a next generation firewall that probably has DNS or web filtering with threat intelligence about URL and IP reputations and domains that your computer should not talk. A lot of this CSE infrastructure is already known to public, so you can actually configure these servers and these services to pretty much do not let your computer talk to them, right? So in that way, you are preventing that malware to download, right? If that is not enough, then you have the sandboxing solution that is going to be on top of your next generation firewall, something that whenever you are downloading the file is going to put that in a sandbox for analysis. And then if that file is not categorized as malware, it will download. But again, let's say that we are in a situation where we actually have a very good adversary, and the attacker, passed these two barriers with all these layers. Now, the next step is going to be actually your endpoint detection and response. Before that malware is able to work, the endpoint detection and response will detect that it's doing something that it should not. And a perfect example here is if you download a Word document, and that Word document is trying to call a PowerShell script, that should be a big question for you. Why a Word document will call PowerShell to run a script? That's a big no-no. Right there is telling you that something is wrong. And that's where the EDR will prevent you, because there's a lot of questions about EDR today. What is the difference between the next generation AV and the EDR? And of course, your traditional and next generation AV, which is your endpoint protections with your intrusion prevention system, your firewalls, your web filtering, all that will help you also to not get that file to your computer. So are much more in the prevention side of the mechanism. Detection is whenever that file arrives, the EDR is not going to probably see that file arise, but as soon as that file wants to execute, the EDR will stop it. And the last portion on this one is the Office Trust Center. You can configure in GPO how that works, so you can block macros to operate. And this month, actually, Office 365 released a new feature that is called Safe Document. Everyone can go and look it online, and that's something that is free as part of your Office 365 subscription, that you can enable that, so you can even prevent users to click enable document or enable macro on top for certain files. So again, there's a lot of things that you can see to prevent from download, and even if you download it, you can prevent the execution of that. Now, let's say that for whatever reason, we have still the case that that's in your computer. Okay, we have a question. Do I need to have all these solutions to protect my company? The short answer to that is you don't need all of them, but as many as you have are going to be more effective in prevention. And some of them work together, right? A next generation firewall normally has a DNS somewhere filtering. A next generation AV, it will have all these three tools. Sandboxing probably is part of your next generation firewall or can be part of your next generation AV. The EDR is something that is normally a separate product. That is today, with the problems that we have with ransomware and trusted code, it to me is not an alternative anymore. It's not a question if you need it. You need it. It doesn't matter what size you are. So a lot of these things work together to kind of, as you can see, as a layer of protection. So if you pass one barrier, you have the next one to protect yourself. So my recommendation on these things is that you probably want to have them. You don't need all of them, but you probably want to have at least the next generation firewall and the next generation AV. Those would be if I had to pick the only two that you can pick, I would be those, and then the EDR. So one more time, let's say that payload now is in your computer. Now that payload is able to execute, right? Something that is very powerful on the previous escalation, we talk about a lot about how to manage the entity access management and all that, and how LT Auditor will help you analyzing some of these. There's a free solution from Microsoft called Labs that you should deploy. Labs is pretty much changing your local admin password for every computer and server with certain frequency, let's say a day, and then it's going to be very long with a very long password. So let's say that someone break in your computer and they kind of steal all your credentials from that computer. If you have Labs, they only have access for 1 day, and they cannot move laterally because that's only accessing to that computer. That administrator access is only for one computer. But as you can see, this is a technical solution that requires a lot of process change. You need to ask your people that whenever they log into that machine to do support, they need to use the Labs user and password. They cannot use themselves because our password normally has from 90 to 120 days of duration. So now, if you put your password, then the guys can have it. The other thing is password hashes. We have seen a lot of NT and LM hashes around. LM hashes, I hope that you don't have it anymore. And if you have, you should not have them. It takes probably less than I don't know how many users you may have, but if you have a user with a LM hash with a less than 14 characters password, we can break that down in minutes. So that password I meant. So LM hashes should be totally out. Another practice that we have seen a lot happening is the people from the organization has to crack their own passwords. And this is not to find out what the password is. You can use the hashing and do check that in places like Pond passwords and see if the hash has any match. So that's something that we have seen also some increment. So as you can see, we talk about the prevention of download and execution, but we also talk about the prevention on the previous escalation, about what things can you do from even if you have the malware, from that malware to move from your box to other places. Now let's talk about how you can prevent on lateral move. Again, you have the malware. We're doing how we can protect from that collection of the hashes, password, etc. And Umesh mentioned this a little bit. You can have something like host-based firewall restrictions. There's no reason today, I would say there's almost no reason today for a computer to talk, right? Today, that should be blocked. And you can use your Windows firewall for that. You can use your next generation firewall for that, but that should be blocked. And that should not be enabled today in your organization. You should not be running SMB version 1, and you should also sign digitally version 2 and version 3. SMB is a very easy way for these guys to get in your services, and whenever they have to move laterally, I guarantee you they're going to use SMB. The 3 and 4 over there is just disable the things that you don't need. This is cybersecurity 101. If you don't have IPv6, right, just disable it, because you are not monitoring it, and there's a good chances that people can take advantage of that an attack using that protocol. And by the way, IPv6 is enabled by default in all Windows boxes. So that's something that if you don't use it, just disable it. The last comment there is use a management box for your servers whenever you have to manage them for RDP type of protocols. And of course, collect events in the SIEM, which will let you kind of see what's going on and identify any kind of this traffic going one way or the other from your different security solutions that you may have. And of course, we talk about this, but let's rephrase backups. Backups is the main target today for ransomware. If you have a backup and you're happy with the backup, make sure that you have an air gap, that you have at least one copy that is not reachable through your network, because that's maybe the only copy that you're going to be able to use if you have a ransomware attack in your organization. And think how often you want that copy to, how recently that copy you need it to be, right? What is the RPO, the RTO, all those very important objectives for your disaster recovery and business continuity that you have to have for this air gap. Super important air gap. And then if you can disconnect drivers after completion. So if you're doing backups and you say, hey, my backup is done, then maybe you can disconnect the drives so they're not there. And of course, very restrictive ACLs. Who can do the backup? Who can restore the backups? Who can access the backup? Pay a lot of attention on the restriction about who accesses that infrastructure, that critical piece of the infrastructure on your network. Okay, so now remember that we're breaking this in 4 different categories. We talk about initiation, right? Then we talk about on the malware side and download and on the execution of the malware. Then we talk about lateral move. And now we're going to talk about communication outside the organization. Again, we have a malware that is trying to communicate to the CSC. It's trying to get instructions of what to do. So again, there's tools here, and I'm glad that someone asked the question, that are the same tools that you have at the beginning, right? So here you have the next generation firewall doing the same thing. It's saying, hey, do not talk to that CSC. Do not talk to these people. Do not use it. One more time, you have the next generation AV with the host firewall and the host intrusion prevention system detecting that type of traffic and shutting it down. You should disable any kind of anonymizers in your network, any kind of proxies, people that is using covert channels to try to send traffic outside the organization to this in this way. And use threat intel. There's a lot of these things that are free for you. So you should take advantage of that and then incorporate those threat intel in your firewall. Beaconing, we talk a little bit about that. And then the SIEM. The SIEM is a great solution that can see all these pieces come together in a single plan. And you can see all these events happening, and you can say, okay, all these things are happening in my network, so I need to pay attention to see what's going on, what I should do. Okay, so let's go through the takeaways. And I know today has been very, very technical, and my idea was to illuminate some of the key concepts about, how what is ransomware, how it works, and then how to prevent it. But if you have to remember a couple of things from today's presentation, I would say these are the most important ones. The first one is ransomware can target anyone. Do not feel that this is not something that is not targeting your organization. Do not feel that this is not something that can happen to you in the future. So take advantage of the presentation today and evaluate these prevention steps that we talk to see how you can better protect your organization. This is something we were talking with John Volante about this. One thing is that if you have one computer, for whatever reason, they get a ransomware attack, right? And that computer got the malware and that computer got encrypted. But imagine that if you can stop that at that level, that only one computer got infected, is very different from someone who tells me that the whole organization got encrypted, right? So there are a lot of things that you can do to even restrict the impact of that ransomware whenever you follow the prevention that we are talking today. We talk about this with the question is, we talk about defense in depth. We talk about all the layers that you can have protecting your organization to kind of protect the different aspects about how ransomware attacks. So it's very important to know how the attack works so you can put these layers of protection to better protect the organization against this. And the last one to me is, we need to demystify some of these. Yes, there's going to be very complex and very high level technical type of attacks, but at the very end we have to understand how they work, and for us to put the preventions in place to see how we can better prevent our company. And the good news today for us is there's a lot of information in this presentation on things that we can act on to prevent at least the most common way that these guys will come in. With that, that was my last slide. So I hope that you enjoy our presentation today. And with that, I will go back to Umesh. I cannot hear you, Umesh. Probably you're muted.
Let's see. Yeah, technology.
Technology.
You talked about demystifying attacks, and you referenced our common friend John Valenti. And his comment has always been, you have to be perfect 100% of the time because it's just one breach. And I think you made that earlier on when you were talking about the phishing attacks, and 3% of the people will, historically, no matter how much training you provide them, they will fall for the phishing attack. So let's talk about demystifying. What are some of the additional steps that one can actually take? Are we talking about security awareness training? How effective is that? How often should that be? How do you involve? I think there's also a cultural issue. You've got to involve your entire organization in it, because you've got to enlist your team, because it's a matter of see something, say something. Otherwise, you've got limited set of eyes, and the network administrators or the security administrators only have so much bandwidth. And so how do you really build that culture within the organization?
To me, one of the things that is always surprising me, and this is coming from the IT side too, right? This is not only information security. It's amazing the amount of good change that you can introduce in an organization if you change your processes. It's amazing. It's actually amazing. And on the user awareness training, people think that the problem is the technology. It's not. As you were saying, normally the most pushback is on the change management side. Pretty much some of your partners who doesn't want to have their team spending time on these kind of things until, of course, something like this happen, and then there's no more alternative, right? So today, and you and I actually talked about this. So there's Texas Administrative Code 1 that was signed with the Houston, the Texas government. So that's impacting almost a lot of our customers, and probably a lot of your customers too, Umesh, right? So, and it has very clear there, cybersecurity awareness training for your users, right? So we start seeing that is being pushed from the regulation side. Not so much, it's a nice to have. Now it's pushed from a regulation side. And I would tell you from my experience, this is what I have seen. Honestly, feedback. We start the phishing campaign with someone who has never done this training. That is between 13% to 25% click rate. 25% click rate. You start the process of training your users, and you start to, kind of, again, helping them to succeed. This is not about punishing people, helping them to succeed. You reduce that to 3%, which is a lot, right? And that probably happens within a year, right? So that's where you want to go. And some of this requires support from your team, requires your management team to support you in what you're trying to do. Because at the very end, it's going to be pretty much everyone in the organization. If not, it's very ineffective. And one more thing on user awareness training is do target training, because HR people require different from finance. And your, the other type of users, if you have someone who has ACH information, if you have someone who has a credit card for the company, those people require a totally different training from your normal users. Your C-level people needs a different training from the different users. So you can touch those things whenever you're using your user awareness training.
Well, excellent. I think it's so important that the number one vector for ransomware is phishing. And, your last topic was phishing. And so,
yeah.
it's the easiest way to get in. But see, you talked about the external flag and how you could set that so easily. So see how it's all kind of related. And I think that's the whole point, is that you have to build and you have to layer, especially for small and mid-sized businesses. They need to be very focused in on that basic blocking and tackling.
Yeah,
And
and as we saw, you have so many places that you can protect, right? So imagine that all this needs to happen for ransomware to be effective, and it's amazing the amount of places where you can stop it, right? You can stop it, right?
right.
And again, as the concept we're saying is one thing that affects one computer, but the totally different thing is if it affects your whole organization. That's why I put a lot of effort saying, okay, think about this, how this work, where are going to be your efforts, right? Of course, you need to start from the initiation because that's going to give you the best results. But then if you cannot prevent that, so how you go to the next one, how you go to the next one, how you go to the next one.
So, Andy, this has been another great episode, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. For our viewers, we will be posting this presentation to the Cyber Houston YouTube channel as well as to the cyberhouston.org website. And if you feel these broadcasts are valuable to you and you would like to stay in the loop, please make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel, the Cyber Houston YouTube channel, and follow our Cyber Houston Facebook page. Cyber Houston is a coalition of volunteer business, cybersecurity, academic, government, and civic leaders. Our goal is to continuously educate and inform business leaders on how to manage and govern cybersecurity risk. We take lessons learned from our enterprise members, distill them down into sensible, economical guidance to help small and mid-sized businesses improve their cyber posture, build resilience, and become better and stronger partners and suppliers back to the enterprise. All of this is done through the lens of helping small and mid-sized businesses, or SMBs, grow their business. This guidance comes in the form of the Business Vitality Guide, the guidance for the Board of Directors, the Cyber Preparedness Assessment, and the free Cyber Scan. All of these resources are free of charge and can be found under the Resources tab on the cyberhouston.org website. So thank you everyone for joining, and special thanks again to our sponsors, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown. With that, please remember to join us on Wednesdays from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central for our weekly Cybersecurity Leadership Series. Thank you, Andy. Thank you for your help, your support, your friendship. And to all our viewers, be safe, stay healthy, have a great day.